Hello and welcome to this UniTaster On Demand webinar. My name is John Cheek. I'm the founder and director of UniTasterDays, and we run these webinars to support students when picking university courses. So this is one of many subjects we've covered where we're looking today at early years to make sure that students really go on to make great university decisions in the future. I'm delighted today to be joined by two wonderful speakers. I'm joined by Glenda, who is joining us from University of Wales, Trinity St David, and also Becky, joining us from the University of Chichester. And I'll give both a full introduction during their sessions. As far as the event today, we're looking at the early years, and we're going to address 4 key topics, which is going to be super useful for you when picking university courses. We're going to look at the reasons to consider early years courses, application tips for early years courses, what to expect on an early years course, and also looking at some of the potential careers that students go on to after they complete an early years program. Our two speakers today, we're going to do it in the order of Glenda going first. Glenda's going to talk about 2 key areas. Glenda's going to talk about application tips, and she's brilliantly placed to do so because she's also an admissions tutor. And Glenda is also going to look at potentially the reasons you might want to consider early years programs. And then Becky's going to follow. And Becky's going to talk about what you can expect on an early years course and also an overview of careers as well. Always conscious though with these events that you've tuned in to hear from our excellent speakers, not from myself. So I'll leave my introduction there and introduce our first speaker, please. That is Glenda Tinney. Glenda is joining us from the University of Wales, Trinity St David, and looking at 2 areas. Glenda's going to look at application tips for early years courses and also the reasons you might want to consider an early years program. Over to you, please, Glenda.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me today to speak. Yes, I'm Glenda Tinney. I'm an admissions tutor for the early years education and care programmes at the University of Wales, Trinity St David, which is based in Swansea and Carmarthen. We have 2 campuses. And so I've based what I'm going to talk about today really on some of the questions I get as an admissions tutor when I'm supporting people make the decision about what they want to study and what sort of courses and questions to ask about really when they're making that important decision. So I hope some of the things I talk about today will support you with that. And the first question was why? Well, why study early years or early childhood programs? Well, I often start from the point of view of thinking about what a child needs really to be happy and healthy, because you'll probably find that is the focus of many early childhood courses. They're really focusing in on how we support children and their families in early childhood. Now, different courses will have a different focus. For example, the course I teach on looks at 0 to 7. Others might focus in on 0 to 8. Others might focus in on other periods within early childhood. But generally, if you're interested in how children develop, the importance of play, you'll notice that most early childhood programs focus in on play and how children learn through play. This might be something that's been of interest to you, trying to think, well, why do children play? Why is it important that children play? How does it support their education and their learning? You might be interested in children's rights. You might be interested in children's rights to a good education, children's right to have a safe and stimulating environment. And that might be part of why you want to learn more about early childhood and children's development. You may well have had an interest in inclusion and thinking about how we support children with additional learning needs and the different ways of doing that effectively. You may well have already had work placement opportunities to support you and thought, well, this is really an area that I want to find out more about. Well, an early childhood course will give you some of the theory and the practical ideas around inclusion and supporting all children to be involved in their play and in their well-being and education. You may well be interested in well-being of children and want to support that and want to do a degree that allows you to gain a lot of knowledge, allowing you to go in to work in early childhood in some way. You also might have wanted to find out more about how we protect children, keep them safe, look at safeguarding issues and child protection issues, looking at the history, the legislation around those things. And you might be very interested in one day yourselves being the sort of leader and the vision for early years when you're out in work. Maybe you'll be wanting to be the person who makes decisions about what is beneficial for young children. And so many early childhood programs focus on leadership in early years, and this might be something you want to find out more about. And also you might want to find out about, well, what is in the education that children have? What is the curriculum for different children? What do they follow? Why have we decided in some countries to have a play curriculum? What do children get out of that? So we look at all aspects of how children develop, learn, well-being. And if these are things that interest you, this might be the choice for you in terms of a degree in early childhood or early years education. So for me, that's the key thing. And these are the questions I often get from students. People who work in the early years sector, who work with young children, be that in schools, in nurseries, in other forms of working with families and children, they're often interested in how children learn and develop, and they want to learn more. And an early childhood degree provides those opportunities. If you're interested in the legislation and policies around working with young children and want to get a depth of knowledge on that, well, a degree like this will provide that for you. You might be the type of person who likes to link theory and practice, learn about all the important, we use names like Piaget and Vygotsky and Froebel and Maslow on these types of courses. Well, you learn about those people, who they were and how they've influenced how we think about working with children and supporting children. And you might want to choose a course that's helping develop your practical learning skills in the early childhood sector. For example, I've got a picture here of students doing a science in the outdoors activity, and they're trying to create a system of moving the water from one place to another. They're learning practically in a hands-on way, which they can then transfer and support and take these ideas into working with young children. And so often early childhood programs have an element of practical learning as well as placement, which may be the way that you want to learn, where you want to link the theory with hands-on learning. And therefore, we do have, these are the questions that I'll come to later. You might want to ask people like me, admissions tutor, what is the differences? What are the academic parts of the course? What are the placement parts? How much practical work is undertaken within lectures? Do they focus on particular things to do practically, like play, outdoor learning, and so on? And of course, if you're interested in developing your understanding of what's happening locally in terms of early years, nationally in terms of early years, and internationally, an early childhood program is really going to provide you with those ideas. So I'm from a Welsh university. I know the next speaker will be from an English university. Well, we look at what's happening in those different countries because the laws and legislation are slightly different. The education system itself is slightly different. But we also then look to other countries such as Scandinavia, Italy, New Zealand, across the world to gain knowledge about how they work with young children as well. So if those are the kinds of things you think, yes, I'd like to find out more so that I'm able to support young children and families in the future, well, this is the types of programs that would be of interest to you. You might also want to think about you and why such a degree would appeal to you, and the sorts of skills that are important on an early years program are having people who have empathy, empathy for the needs of young children and their families. they develop their communication and interpersonal skills, because it is placement and so on in different degrees will involve talking to people, negotiating with people, learning how to communicate effectively with adults and children. And so these are the skills you'll develop, but these may also be the skills that you have already that you think will support an early childhood program. Often on early childhood programs, you'll be working on team projects in some assignments and also in placement. And again, developing that skill will be very important for all areas of work. You might be motivated to make a difference, that you really want to make a difference in young children's lives, that you really want to support them get the best opportunities. And so these kinds of programs can lead you to a place where you can make a difference, where you can be working in the with young children in different sectors, really supporting their health and well-being. And for many, I know for many of my past students, they've also gone on to lead early years practice. So they can be really having their own vision of what early years should look like. They take on into work situations, either leading their own nurseries, managing their own Flying Start settings, managing family centres. So they're going on into a role where they're making a difference and having a significant impact on the sector. And these are skills that we develop during early childhood programs. And they're also really important transferable skills, so that they can be transferred into other types of work as well. So we've had students, for example, do an early years education and care degree who've gained experience of communication in different ways through their assignments, through presentations, through working as a team. They've gained important teamwork and leading skills while being on the degree. But these are skills they then transferred into many roles and different types of work, including work outside early years, where they may be working in the local authority, or they may be working in a research field, using these same skills to develop a research project or further study. So the next thing that I'd like to talk about is application tips for courses like early childhood courses. Well, the first thing I would say is, don't be afraid to contact admissions tutors. People like me love to speak to prospective students. We love to find out about them, and we like to give them guidance and support. And so you might be interested in a range of different places to study. Well, get in contact with the admissions tutors to find out what those courses are about. It's really important to ask questions. I know I've had students in the past say, oh, I don't want to ask questions, I'll be bothering you. Not at all. We love to hear your questions, and we love to give you the right support for you. And actually, we remember those people who might email with a question or phone with a question. We remember that they were so interested that they got in touch to ask questions and find out about the course. Because by doing this, you can find out if the course is the course for you. And I'll come later to some of the things you might want to be asking questions about. But one of the key things that people ask me is, well, what sort of things do you as an admissions tutor want to know about us when we fill in our UCAS application or put in our personal statement? So, we will support you by answering those questions, but we'll also be able to help you find out which skills would be the ones to highlight in your personal statement. So yes, get in touch, find out more about the course, go on the internet as well to find out about the course you're studying. Now you can see here, this is some students on an early years education and course with us, out doing practical work. Now you might want to ask questions like that when you talk to an admissions tutor, or browse the course on the web. Is it lecture-based with very big lecture rooms, or is it smaller classes? So for example, the courses I teach, we have smaller classes, classroom-based. We don't tend to have, or we don't have big lecture rooms because we have a course that's based very much on practical work as well as the academic discussion. So you might want to ask that, what's the course like? And will that suit you as a student? Would you prefer a big lecture theatre, or would you prefer smaller class sizes? Would you prefer practical elements? Is that how you learn? You know, ask what kinds of things do the courses that you're interested in do. Ask them for examples of the sorts of practical work that they might be involved in. You might want to find out if the courses have placement. Many early childhood programs have placement. It's a requirement for them to have placement in terms of recognition by certain organisations as well, which I'll come to later. But, you know, how is that undertaken? How many hours of placement are you expected to do? Is it a block of placement, or is it a weekly placement throughout the course? Where will these placements be held, and what's your role in finding placement, or how does the college help you and support you to find a placement? And a placement means where you go and work in an early years nursery, or in an early years nursery classroom, or in family centre, something like that, to gain practical experience. You might want to also find out before you apply about these types of assignments you'll be doing. Do they have exams, or is it all coursework based? Because this can help you then consider, well, do I want to study this course? And also maybe help you think about the things you want to highlight when you apply that you've done before, that will support the types of things the degree will be asking you to do. And of course, you might want to find out more personal things as well. Well, where is this course? In what town? Is it a very big city? Is it a smaller town? Is it a more rural location? Because these things will also help you to decide if it's the course for you. You might also want to consider, well, is it a campus-based university, or is it a university that's spread out around different parts of a town? Again, things like this help students decide not only on the type of course they want to do, but where they want to do it. And again, the admissions tutor will be able to give you information on this. You can ask the admissions tutor as well if they have any student ambassadors who might be able to be put in contact with to support you as well, and to find out what it's like being a student on the course. And I always think that's really important for students. You can talk to the admissions tutor, but to be able to have a chat with a current student can be very valuable in finding out what it's like to be in the course itself and doing some of these different activities. I did mention placement, and I did mention that some degrees are recognised, and this might be part of your decision of why you want to apply for a certain course. Does the course have recognition as a practice qualification? So for example, it might be an academic BA honours, but it also is recognised by organisations to allow you, once you graduate, to be recognised as having a licence to practice in a early years setting. Now, I know in England, the Early Childhood Studies Degrees Network have graduate practitioner competencies, which they take as allowing you to work in early childhood settings. So is this degree recognised and on the Early Childhood Studies Degrees Network? In Wales, they also have to comply, for example, to Social Care Wales recognised courses. So is the course, if you're thinking of studying in Wales, recognised as a licence to practice by Social Care Wales? And these are the sorts of things you can find out about by asking admissions tutors, by going on their website, again, to find out if you're choosing the right course for what you want to do. The other things you might want to ask before you apply to make sure you're making the right decision is, well, is this a day course? Early childhood courses are really, there's a variety of ways of studying. So you could study in the day on many courses, and you may be coming straight from college or school and coming to study in the day. However, you might be someone who already works in the early years sector, who's already done other qualifications, who wants to top up a qualification, or who hasn't had the opportunity to do a degree, but would like to study a degree and can still work in schools, early years settings and so on. Well, there are flexible degrees which are delivered in the evening or on certain days, for example, which you can split around your work. And that means that you are working in the sector, but also being able to gain a degree qualification. And so it's worth you finding out, because for some students, they sometimes think, oh, I can't get a degree because I'd have to give up work. Well, actually, especially in early childhood and early years courses, that's not necessarily the case. You are able to come back into education and study while still maintaining your roles in the early childhood sector. So these are questions worth asking. You also might want to consider courses that are more blended. There will be courses that offer in-person as well as online support, so that you can do both online and in-person learning. So you might want to consider what works for you around your commitments. And again, ask the question of the admissions tutor, who will be able to talk about the range of different delivery modes and ways of studying early years. So one of the things you will have to do when you apply is, if you're applying through UCAS, you will be filling in the UCAS form with your current role, your current qualifications, with a reference and so on. But one of the key parts, I think, of the application process for an early childhood program is your personal statement, which is you really discussing why you want to do the courses you've applied for, and what is it about you that should make someone like me, an admissions tutor, accept you on the course. And I think these are really crucial for early childhood, because we're really looking for people that are motivated, who want to learn about young children, who want to use their skills as well practically to support young children. So this personal statement can give us a really good insight into you. So the sorts of things you would add here is, well, why do you want to study an early childhood, early years education course? Well, maybe you've been inspired by someone in the past, maybe a teacher at school. Maybe you've been inspired by remembering back to your own care and education and how people supported you then. We have a lot of students whose long-time goal is to teach. And often the start of their personal statement highlights why a teacher or a school really inspired them to want to take that on further in their own careers. It might be that you've been inspired from your own work experience. Maybe in school, you went to support in a classroom, and maybe that week or so of work experience really inspired you to want to learn more about early childhood, about how children develop. And that you found out in that work experience in a school or nursery that that's really what was of interest to you moving forward. But you might also be working with young children and now really want to do some more study so that you can understand the research and the theory behind young children and supporting young children. You might also have been inspired by your own family experiences. maybe you are a parent looking after children and wanting to learn more about how children develop. You might have been looking after younger siblings. You might have had work experience as well, working as in childcare or as a childminder that you think would now be supported by this degree. So we find out a little bit about what's inspired you to take that in your application. But your personal statement can also highlight what you're doing now. You might be studying in college or school. So what courses are you studying? And what experiences in those courses have helped you in terms of studying and doing research, and how those skills might be very useful when you come to do your degree. You might be studying certain courses that are more to do with children's development or health and social care or psychology, for example. Well, you could, highlight how some parts of those A-levels, BTECs and different qualifications have given you an insight into early childhood that you'd like to take further. As I mentioned, you might talk about your experience and you might have been volunteering with a football club, helping young children play football. You might have done some voluntary work in your school or college. Well, it's very valuable. It's good to know that you're the type of person who's given up their time to do extra things. You might have been a mentor in school for some of the younger children. These are really key experiences that help us see what kind of student you are and how motivated you are. You might as well have had, if you're a more mature student, significant experience working in the early childhood sector, which again is worth discussing in your personal statement. Employment as well, and I don't just mean here employment in the earlier sector. You may well have had a part-time job working in a restaurant, working in a retail environment. Well, this will have given you really important skills: organisation, communication, interpersonal skills, team working skills. As I said at the beginning of my presentation, these are the sorts of skills you'll also need when you're studying an early childhood program. So any employment that you've had can offer insights into the sorts of skills and responsibilities you've had. And of course, you may have interests as well, hobbies, that, music, art, things like that, that again are really useful in the early childhood sector. So if you can play any level of an instrument, that's really interesting because children are fascinated. And if you go into a setting with a guitar or a flute or something, they'll be really interested in just looking and having a go at those types of music experiences. So really, it's important that some of your interests will really support your personal statement as well. Because what you're doing in your personal statement is demonstrating your transferable skills. It's demonstrating that what you've done already would make you a valuable asset to our degree. And I think the personal statement, for me as an admissions tutor, is so important in giving us a full rounded view of the person rather than just relying on qualifications. So it is really important that that personal statement supports your application. And again, go back to the admissions tutor. You can chat to the admissions tutor about what kinds of things they'd like to hear about in a personal statement. So this will really help you when you're planning what to write. So that's all I wanted to say, really. And I think the key thing is not to be scared to get in touch with any admissions tutors on early childhood and early years programs. Get in touch, ask questions, and find out if it's the right course for you, and then how you can make the best application possible to fit the needs of that course.
Thank you very much, Glenda. That was an excellent introduction to early years programs, looking at two areas: application tips, and as Glenda said, she is an admissions tutor at University of Wales, Trinity St David, and also Glenda touched on some of the reasons you might be interested in an early years program. So a big thank you again to Glenda. Our next speaker is Becky Edwards. Becky is a senior lecturer with the University of Chichester, and Becky's going to talk about early years still, but two other themes. So we're going to look at an overview of potential careers that students can go on to after completing an early years course, but also really what, in terms of course content, what you might expect if you study an early years program. And it's brilliant that Becky's going to deliver this, because Becky is one of the people that actually do teach on this program. So Becky, I'll pass the floor to you, please.
Hello, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and talk to you today about early childhood studies. As John has told you, my name is Becky. I'm head of programme for the BA in Early Childhood Studies at the University of Chichester. But what I'm here to talk to you today about is following on from what Glenda has said about why choose early childhood studies. All the things she said, all the reasons she's given you are absolutely spot on. There's no way I could say it better. I'm here, as she is, with a passion for early childhood and childhood. And I hope that by the time our students leave us, even if they weren't quite as passionate as us about early childhood studies before they arrive, they leave with that passion burning inside them. Just to begin by saying, why choose early childhood studies? Because there is no more important job that we can do than look after, care for, educate and inspire the people who are going to be leaders in the future. And that's where we start with early childhood studies. It's about being the difference in children's lives. So I thought I'd just tell you a little bit more about me, because something I'm going to talk about is the wide-ranging subjects that we talk about in early childhood studies. So I'm a lecturer. I used to run a children's centre. I've set up a charity for children with special educational needs and disabilities and their siblings. So we do a lot of work on inclusion. And I don't know if you can see I'm using this. I write children's books. So these are the books that I have written. I'm going to be using this the little window there a little bit, so sometimes your eyes might have to flit from the slides to me, so I hope that's all right. So I'm going to begin just by introducing you to the team that we have at Chichester, but this is an example of teams that you will find in early childhood studies wherever you are. Early childhood studies is not just about having those people who have purely been in early years education. That's an important part, but as you can see from our variety of men, women, different ages, different nationalities, as you might guess from Eva Mukuska's name, she's from Hungary. We have a range of people with a range of skills, and the wonder of early childhood studies is that it can be for people who know that they want to work with children or with families, not sure that they want to go into teaching or go down that education route, but just want to get that basis of understanding that can give them a stepping stone into whatever career they choose. And I'm going to come back to the range of career opportunities, because as Glenda said, there's early years, there's working in nurseries, there's working in reception, there's teaching, but there are so many other things that you can do with an early childhood studies degree. So I'm not going to go through everybody, but I just wanted to give you a taster of our staff. So we do have a play therapist called Carol, who's not actually on this slide, because she works between two departments. She works as a counsellor and she works with us in early childhood studies. But so she does talks about therapeutic play, about how play links to everything we are and do and become. Glenda talked about play. One of the things you will talk about and be doing a lot of on an early childhood studies course is playing, and I'm going to come back to that later. So I'm just introducing the ideas that we will talk about in a bit more detail later. We have Chris Smethurst, who's the head of our department, who's a social worker who lectures with us. We have Andre, who is a sociologist and has a real interest in criminology. So I know that Glenda talked about human rights, but often in early childhood studies degree, there'll be an element of criminology, which is about when do children, at what age can we consider children as criminals, or are they ever criminals? Nature versus nurture, all those kind of things. And we have Sandra as well, who was an educational psychologist before she became a lecturer. Tim Gully, who has worked with prisoners, worked with the children of prisoners. Susanna McGregor, who's doing her research on poverty and food banks. So just to give you a taster of the kind of subjects that will come into early childhood studies. And on that, in a bit more detail, so this is the things that you will study in Chichester, but as you can see, a lot of them are very similar to the things that Glenda talked about. So there's some key areas that you will always study. As Glenda said, there is always an element of placement in early childhood studies degrees. One of these is usually in a nursery or an early years setting, but the others can be in other places if you want them to be. They might be in schools, in reception classes. So our early childhood studies goes from 0 to 8. That's true of most early childhood studies degrees. Some that are called childhood rather than early childhood go on to children who are a bit older. So you will always have content that is around safeguarding, around child development, preparing for your practice. You will always, as I've said before, can you tell I love it, have sessions around play and different kinds of play, but also looking at that international perspective. I feel like I'm repeating some of the things that Glenda says a little bit, but we look at not only the way that children in early years are taught in other countries, but we also think about policies around childhood. It's finished now, but you might be aware of the one-child policy in China, where families were only allowed to have one child. Is this okay? Is that a good idea? If our world is about to collapse, is that not actually a sensible thing to ask people to do? Or do governments have the right to decide how many children we're allowed to have and what we do with our bodies? So we take in early childhood key issues from childhood, but we turn them into big debates using the academic skills that you will develop over your time with us. And then nearly all early childhood studies courses will have an element of working together with families. Another passion of mine, because when I was running the children's centres, that is what we did all day. But something we need to learn as early years educators, as people who work with children, as parents, is that you cannot look at the child completely on their own. Children are part of a family. The family live together in a home. The home is in a block of flats. The block of flats is on a street. The street is part of the area that they live in. Children are one element of a much bigger picture. So working with families is incredibly important. So early childhood studies degrees will always have elements of working with parents, and there will be some practical element of that. We might look at communication skills. One of the favourite modules one of the sessions in one of the modules that's one of my favourites is how to have good, bad conversations. We've all been there. We've all had to have a conversation that we've been really dreading. Working in early years, working with families, you might well be the first person who has to tell a parent that maybe you're worried their child has a special educational need or disability. You might be the person who has to go in and say, do you know what, we're really worried about what's going on in your family. How do you, as practitioners, have the skills and the confidence to have those conversations? So working with families is integral to almost every early childhood studies degree that you will find. Then in the final year, as with all degrees, you will always write, we call it an independent project, universities call it lots of different things. So it's a dissertation. So at our university, at the University of Chichester, that is 8,000 words. Some universities it's longer. It's a module that goes all the way through the year, and you will choose what the topic is. It has to be related to early years, but it can be on whatever you want it to be on. So we've had students doing their dissertations on things like whether it's really important to breastfeed, whether it's okay that many children's centres are being closed down, were they actually doing something valuable, looking at literacy skills, is phonics important, should we actually be sending our children to early years settings at all, or actually is it more important for them to stay at home with their parents? What are we doing to our children? Are we giving them better or worse starts by thinking that early years education is an important place to go? Those are the kind of subjects that students look at in their dissertations. At the University of Chichester and in many other universities, it's primary research. So either you will interview teachers or parents, or you will send out questionnaires, or you will talk to people in a group, and then you will write down what you found out from having those conversations. And then in our final year, we have quite a lot of choices. And I'm just going to tell you about this one, obviously because it's one of my favourites, because it's children's literature and the media, but we're going to come back to the assessment for that when we're looking at the kind of assessments that you will be looking at when you're in early years. So we try and give, and in all early years studies degrees you will find this, we try and give as broad a scope as we can. So while you've got placement aspects, you've also got other issues that you're thinking about more broadly. So for example, if we are thinking about play and creativity, the kind of questions we might ask you are things like this. So I'm just going to leave you with this one. So what do we mean when we say play? Is it about having toys like this one? I don't know if you can see it. So this cool dude duck here that you can squeeze and it squeaks. Having a child sit and play with that, is that play? Is this the only thing that can be a toy? Or what if we have things like this? Are these toys, or are they actually just things you use for cooking? Is it okay to let children play with these? Why might these actually be more fun than something like this? I'm going to leave you thinking about that. Then my email address is at the end of this PowerPoint in case you want to email me with your answers to that one. So those are the kind of questions that we will be asking. Any subject that you do, the big thing that we want you to do at university is think about it in a different way. Think about it critically, which doesn't mean say, no, that's not a good toy, that's a good toy. We're not just talking about criticizing, we're talking about looking at things from a different perspective, thinking about things in a different way, wondering if a wooden spoon is actually a better toy than a squeaky plastic duck. All those kind of things. So on this PowerPoint here, they're the kind of things that you would be doing in any early childhood studies. We've got adventure education, therapeutic play, international perceptions of childhood, rocking the cradle. So that is working with babies. There will always be an element of working with babies. And believe me, that is not just about changing nappies, which is what people often say. There is, as we all know, the first 1001 days of any child's life are the most important days. So knowing how to stimulate, care for, look after and inspire babies is one of the most important things that we will do. And then at every level at the moment, in level 4, 5 and 6, there is the potential to do a placement. And the reason for this is something that Glenda talked about, is that most early childhood studies degrees in England in particular have now introduced something called graduate practitioner competencies. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about those. They're not compulsory, but you can do them if you want to. So our graduate practitioner competencies are an extra part of a degree in early childhood studies that has been brought in to early years very recently in the last few years. So one of the things that you might want to look for when you are looking at a degree is whether the university that you are looking at offers those capabilities, that graduate practitioner competencies. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it at the end of this PowerPoint. So hold that in your mind while I go through a few of the other things that you might experience. So as a mum of 2 children who are at university, I know one of the things that they are very interested in when they're thinking about content for their early years is how assessments are made. So some universities still do exams in early years, but in general, most early years degree courses are assessed through essays, through reflective accounts, so thinking about why the things you've learned are important, how they might impact on you. At level 4, essays are 3,000 words long. At level 5 and 6, they're 4,000 words. We also use case studies. There are group presentations. There are individual presentations. Some people love them, some people hate them. Bit of Marmite around presentations. Portfolios, so when you are on placement, you'll be creating portfolios as evidence of the work that you're doing on placement. And then in children's literature and the media, which is why I wanted to mention it earlier, the assessment is to make a children's book or make a social media activity that is peer reviewed and then potentially used. So one of the things you do need to think about, as Glenda said, is what kind of assessments are you most comfortable with? And if you can't find anywhere on the website that tells you, as Glenda said, email me and email the head of a program, email admissions, and they can find all those things out for you. What's important is that the course you choose is in the place you want it to be, gives you the degree you want to get, and has content that really interests you. And we've also, in many early childhood studies degrees, we've added an integrated foundation year. So those of you who are maybe a bit worried that you're not going to get the grades that you want, or you've had a little bit of time off and are not quite confident enough yet about jumping straight back into academia, into study, you might want to consider doing an extra year, which is just an introduction to early years, but also to study skills, to give you that little bit of extra confidence. So you might want to check whether the university that you're applying to offers one of those. And looking at the potential employment that can come from an early childhood studies degree. So Obviously, it's something you think a lot about. As I said, many of our students are not 100% sure what it is they want to do. They just know that they want to do something that involves working with children. So here are a few of the things you might be able to do. It's hard to come up with a list that contains it all. But some of the things that you can look at, and a lot of our students do end up doing, is either going into social work, doing an MA in social work, doing a postgraduate certificate in education and becoming a teacher, becoming an early years teacher, or a nursery nurse, or a nursery manager. But there are lots of other opportunities out there, and one of the things that most universities will do will bring in professionals linked to early childhood but not necessarily in teaching or education for you to talk to. So some of those things are speech and language therapists, occupational therapists. I've just done a reference for someone who's going to go on and do paediatric nursing because they really liked that she had that underpinning early childhood knowledge. Play workers, so charities like the charity I've set up, Pat, so we have play workers who go out and work in the homes with children with special educational needs and disabilities, and they run play schemes and after school clubs. So early childhood can really give you the grounding for that. Every early childhood studies degree will have one module that's on inclusion and special educational needs and disability. So you will always come out with that knowledge. Outreach workers, they work in areas like early help, kind of on the cusp, just before maybe families might be going up into child protection, and the early intervention might be the thing that makes a difference. So quite a lot of our students become outreach workers. A few become special needs teachers. Quite a few are about to become play therapists. They've done a play therapy course. We've had students who have set up their own forest school. I'm going to show you some photos in a minute which show you the kind of things that can lead to these occupations that we will do. So we've had a few people running their own forest schools, and that does go back to what Glenda was talking about leadership and management skills as well. And any of those types of therapy, like speech and language, physiotherapy, we have some students who've gone to do occupational therapy, who've taken the lead in child development centre activities in collaboration with therapists. Also, students have gone on to become community nursery nurses, working in the community with health visitors together. The thing about an early childhood studies degree is it is a step into almost anything that is to do with children, young people, and working with families. The feedback we get from professionals is that students who have done early childhood studies degrees are coming with a really rounded experience that they can bring to their practice, that gives them that extra quality that professionals are looking for. The other thing that a lot of degrees do, and we do it as well, is we give you a few extra pieces of training to take with you. So at the University of Chichester, and I know other places do it, in our level 6 we provide a part-funded paediatric first aid course, because anyone who's going into an early years setting is going to need paediatric first aid. And we also run Makaton workshops. Makaton is a type of sign language, supported language for children with special educational needs and disabilities. So one thing to look out for in your early childhood studies degree is not just the content, not just the courses that they run, but what are the extras? What extra things can they give you so that you come out with all the skills you could possibly need from your university degree? And we often have guest speakers. So just to give you a taster of some of the guest speakers, I know you don't really need the photos, but I always think photos are more interesting than words. We have Lara, who does a lot on co-production, working with families with children with special educational needs to make sure their rights are heard. Angie Brereton in the right-hand corner with that mischievous grin is an amazing storyteller, comes and teaches us how to tell stories and tells stories to us. People like Kevin over in the top corner who has cerebral palsy and talks about it, and then Alex in the bottom corner who works with children who've been excluded from schools. Every early childhood course you go on will have a huge variety of guest speakers to come and talk to you, so that you get a real feel for what it's like to be out there working with and working for the community. And just to give you, before I finish and talk about the graduate practitioner competencies quickly, a taste of some of the things that you might experience on an early childhood studies degree course. These are our students, but you could take these pictures on any early childhood studies course, I think. So a bit of rock climbing. How can we build self-confidence in our children? There is nothing there is no more amazing feeling than the sense of having climbed to the top of something on a climbing wall. So it's not just about the physical activity. We look at the emotions that are around that. Swinging from the rocks, and then also beach school. So early childhood studies now thinks outside of the box and teaching. We have beaches. We are lucky in the University of Chichester, we have beaches nearby. So one of our sessions is a beach school. Here everyone obviously is being a pirate, so because what else would you do on a beach but look for treasure? So it's thinking about how we can use the outdoor environment to engage our children and our students, obviously. Yep, still digging for treasure, doing a pirate dance. And then we do a lot of imaginative play, thinking about how working with puppets, how working imaginatively can help children experience and understand their emotions better. Forest school we've talked about, so a lot about all this, as Glenda was showing, there's a lot of information about the benefits of outdoor play for children today, but we make sure that our students experience what children might experience, because there's no better way of empathizing with those children's experiences. Therapeutic play, this was all the students who'd completed their therapeutic play module, with Carol in the middle, who also has a therapy dog who she sometimes brings in to sessions. And then we look at the creative curriculum. So there's a big debate around whether there is enough creativity going on in schools. It's all right at nurseries, but often once you hit reception, and definitely key stage 1, a lot of the creativity leaves education. So we spend quite a lot of our time looking at play and creativity together, looking at why they're important, what children and everyone can learn from it, and why that keeping that creative part of the brain alive is so important. So as Glenda said, a lot of early years studies programs are going to have a lot of practical elements. And this is just some of the activities we do to experience what children are experiencing. But in the bottom corner, I think we were talking about, well, how can we do counting and shapes with children? So it's using tools to do that. Some of the creative, I don't know what to call them. I was going to say pictures, but some of the creative things that have been made when we've gone out and talked again about whether a plastic or wood or natural materials are better for playing with than the ones that we buy in the shop. Which is better? How can we use them? Talk about the whole sensorial experience and what children gain from that. And then we do other things where it's practical, but it's taking a more, it's looking at more, I suppose, intellectual concepts. So here we're looking at family mapping. How do families work? How do they fit together? Who's at the center of a family? Is it an aero bar? Would that be the most important thing? And which cars come right close to the person who's in the middle of the family? So we try and think of different ways of helping our students understand and think about big problems. And yeah, as Glenda was saying, most early childhood studies lectures will be interactive, but often we do small group work, or we have you do things in pairs. So you're not doing things on your own, because not everyone feels comfortable in talking in a big group. So most early childhood studies courses will look at all those things. And yeah, as Glenda was saying, most early childhood studies have peer mentors, so they have students who support other students. So this is just, and becoming a peer mentor is a really good thing to put on your CV. So it's, have a look whether universities are offering opportunities for things like that as well. Being a peer mentor develops those skills that you would need in any kind of working with families, working with young people, that ability to communicate, that ability to empathize, that ability to be non-judgmental and open. And of course we have the social side, so I just had to put that in, so you know it's not all study. When we're all allowed to sit in the same spaces again, we will carry on having our social events. This is true of all universities. Part of university, a big part, as I'm sure you all know, is making friends. In these strange times, that has been particularly hard for everyone. So you might want to ask your universities if they did face-to-face up till now, what kind of online activities they do to help keep their students engaged with each other. And just a final thing to say about early childhood studies and placements. If they're doing graduate practitioner competencies, there will be a level 4 placement that's 25 days, a level 5 placement that's 30 days. And then if you decide to go on and get your competencies, you do a 25 days again at level 6. If you do that, you leave university not only with a level 6 academic qualification, but also with a level 6 practical qualification. Up till now, your practical qualification could only be at level 3, but graduate practitioner competencies are trying to up the status of early years professionals, because we all understand how important it is to recognise the skills that you need. So check for the universities that offer that. And yeah, this is just to talk about the placement days as well. So I won't go into too much detail about that. If any of you have any more questions, once you've handed in your IPs at the end of your degree, you will be graduating. But before you get to that stage, if you have any questions about any of the things we've talked about today, about the content of our courses, please do email me on this email address. It should be b.edwards, I've just noticed, not b.edwards @chi.ac.uk.